Hi, my name is Alex Early, and I will be covering tragedies in journalism and how it affects journalists. Journalists have had to cover tragedies for a significant amount of years. There's a new tragedy every day to be covered. Tragedies are used to make the highest amount of money possible in order to beat any outside competition. Because the competition is so intense and so saturated within the journalist market, it makes it very difficult for a journalist to get by. So, in order to make an income within the journalism industry, a journalist has to seek the highest paying story. And those highest paying stories are 9 times out of 10 a tragedy. But what they don't know is that there's multiple stories to be told. The economy affects journalism because the industry is suffering due to social media and instant information sources like the internet. This field is also suffering due to the 2008 recession or any fall off from the 2008 recession. Marketing is also extremely difficult in this field. There are hundreds of stories being written in a day, and tragedies are viewed the most because they seem to be the most personal. The more personal a story is, the more it's going to be viewed. Fear is also the driving factor when it comes to selling a story because fear always receives the most attention. Therefore, fear holds the majority of the market. The more personal a story is, and the more fear it holds, the more views it's going to receive. But journalists also have to distinguish what stories are marketable. Most of the tips that a journalist does use to distinguish whether or not a story is marketable is by trying to figure out whether or not there was a local involved, if there is anybody from the area. Also, the geography of the area and the amount of tourists that are attracted to the area also pay a significant amount as to whether or not that story is marketable, such as the fire of Notre Dame. And the viciousness of the tragedy is also a marketing factor. Depending on how cruel or avaricious the act is, that will also help develop how marketable the story is. And as well as the fame of any individuals involved, as well as how shocking the story can be. The more out there and outlandish or tragic a story is, the more views it is going to receive. The presence of children as well as the number of deaths plays a significant factor as to whether or not the story is marketable as well. Journalism ethics, however, are a little bit difficult, but once they are learned, they should be fairly easy to follow. Journalists are to show compassion and empathy toward all individuals involved. They are to respect all individuals involved. They are not to be abrasive when interviewing or when trying to reach the truth. They are to conduct themselves properly and with proper mannerisms and achieve the correct information. It should not have to be a race as to who gets the first story. It should be who gets the story right. So no matter what the story is, the journalist should always take the time to receive the correct information. Why should the market for tragedies change? Well, first of all, there is more than one story to be told. Not every story is a tragedy, and every story should have an impact on every individual's life and how everyday life is lived. Covering other tragedies covering other stories grants the viewers the chance to see more than just the bad things in the world. It gives the viewer a reprieve from anything stressful or intimidating. It gives them a chance to see that there is hope and things that are meaningful in the world. It also grants viewers the opportunity to experience a feeling other than fear. Whenever an individual is to turn on the TV and all they see is one bad thing after the next, how afraid they should be all the time, it makes it difficult to function well as a human being. So, covering other stories grants viewers and journalists the opportunity to experience feelings other than fear. Tragedy also has certain effects on journalists. When journalists are conducting interviews with those associated with the tragedy and trying to get the depth of the story, the journalist has to place an emotional barrier between themselves and the individuals involved, as well as the tragedy. Every once in a while, those emotional barriers are bound to break, and it does take a toll on the journalist. And it takes a toll on those around them as well. There is a constant presence of emotions involved with the journalist, making it hard for the journalist to write black and white effectively without obscuring the story and the journalist's own emotions. And this proves to be even more difficult when a tragedy occurs. There is also the off chance that a journalist will be on the other side of the story, and because journalists experience life at its fullest, just like any other individual, sometimes they can be on the receiving end of the tragedy as well. There are multiple side effects with any tragedy because everyone is affected. There is a negative light that comes with covering tragedies. And when another topic is covered, it gives way for a positive light and therefore a healthier way of thinking. Humans have this knack for focusing on the negative. And that gives way to feelings like depression and anxiety, among others. And tragedies offer the opportunity for a narrow-minded way of thinking. When humans focus on more positive aspects instead, there's a chance to express emotions in a healthy manner. Covering other topics also allows for the viewers to realize that not all journalists are inconsiderate. If anything, it gives viewers a chance to understand that journalists are human, just like the viewers, and a journalist's main mission when writing a story is to pursue the truth. There tends to be less stress involved with other topics, for all parties included, and less stress makes for a more enjoyable task. Due to the market, it is much more viable to report a tragedy because they do make the most money, especially when considering how many of them are being written in a day, among other stories. However, if so many stories are being written in a day, it makes for a very saturated market, making the competition very intense when trying to sell, well, any story for that matter. There's the option to write about other topics that will ultimately be more beneficial and will create the opportunity for better mental health on the viewer side as well as the journalist side. There's obviously a better choice. It is just a matter of changing the norm and giving individuals the chance to learn about something more positive. In order to change the preferred norm of writing tragedies, journalists have to begin by using all and any resources wisely. Some of the resources that could be used include the internet, other journalists, and a vast amount of other topics that are available to cover. The internet is an amazing tool that allows for an abundant amount of information on any topic. Using other journalists is also a great opportunity to expand one's knowledge, as well as getting started about something that's not concerning a tragedy. Other journalists also may be able to provide advice on how to switch from covering tragedies to other topics. There are also many different stories to be covered, and it would be extremely difficult to not choose other topics. It is mostly a matter of trying to figure out how to sell different stories. There are multiple topics to cover, such as politics, community efforts, news programs, and the latest social norms to be discussed among so many other topics. It is simply a matter of choosing the right topic and figuring out whether or not it is a topic that it can be as equally as passionate or have as big of an involvement as a tragedy. There is a way to actively pursue other stories, and all one really has to do is just take the initiative to cover them. You could start by reading something of interest, something common amongst humans, making sure that it's a common topic to make sure that it is marketable. After finding something of interest, try writing about it. and seeing if it is marketable as a written topic. And if that one doesn't work, there's always the chance to go and find another topic of interest. Ways to make a story marketable is to be consistent with the genre of writing that stories have and to make it a common topic within the journalist's written work. So a journalist has to make it common within their own written works. The more common a topic is, the more it will hold a public interest. The bigger the market is going to be for that topic if the public has interest in it. Journalists cover tragedies because they are easy to sell and the market is common as well as open for them. But there are multiple stories to be covered, and there are multiple mental health benefits that come with covering more positive topics. There are also many ways to cover different stories, as well as how to become invested in them to turn a positive profit. While tragedies need to be covered too, journalists should focus on more than just the bad news because good does exist in the world. There are multiple stories to be told, and there is more to report on than tragedy. Of course, a tragedy should be respected, and every story does deserve to be told. But not every story is a tragedy. There are more positive topics that can be covered. And that is my topic. And thank you for your time.